Yes, please.
I have a question. I'm also, bringing up my example a long time ago when I was in Bangladesh and also worked with Action Aid and some peace organization. When using PRA, and I cannot totally associate with that, ask them. Even now I will say, you don't know the answer, you ask them. And I think what my experience was, somehow it depends on actually how you ask them also. Because it's the facilitator, because even for me, going to my own context and my village, I am considered as a foreigner to the villagers. So the way when I am actually asking the question, and sometimes I will hear what I want to hear. Because we have also, I think, contaminated a lot of villages, taking consideration of Bangladesh, with the development work. So they know actually what we want to hear. So somehow, even to kind of that control group and this, intervention group, you won't actually get the real picture. So asking them, yes, it's good, but then I think for me it's so important how you ask them, and also as a facilitator, and I think that whole ABC is important for me, because if I'm aware of it, how I'm asking and it's going to influence, then only I can actually do it. Because a lot of people come back that we have done the PRA and this is what the villagers actually want. The villagers want that we want to actually do this ACD center. And I honestly, I said, no, I don't believe it. Because to me, it's not the real answer. And many times I myself wanted to wear kind of like a burqa, so that even, I can't influence if I go and even I try to be one of them and asking the question. So for me, I think my experience is that how you ask them, and you are pretending to be one of them to ask that question. So no matter who is doing the facilitation, and I think it's so important to kind of think about it. Otherwise, we influence the kind of result and even the answer.
Would anyone like to respond to that, or agree or disagree, or elaborate? I've got something to contribute. Anybody?
I agree with you. Social bias is massive, and people sometimes don't realise the power of being the person asking the question, which comes back to your point about the varied role of the interviewer, even in these participatory methods.
Absolutely. And that weakness of PRA we hadn't really recognised in the 90s and even in the noughties. But it's definitely there. Now, you mentioned Bangladesh, and I've got two examples from Bangladesh. I'm asked up there, had anybody heard of reality checks? And I think nobody had. Where is it? Reality checks. Oh, wait a minute, no, know a bit about, and heard of only, but most have never heard of, and none of you. This is a brilliant approach, which many people don't know about. If you Google for reality check approach, I checked yesterday, it'll get you into the website. What they do in reality checks is a thing called an immersion. An immersion is where you go as an ordinary person, not as someone from a project. And you stay with a family for 2, 3, 4 nights. The nights are important. How many of us have done that at some time? A number have. It's a very, very powerful approach. The World Bank under Wolfenson adopted it for all their senior managers, and many of them went and had remarkable experiences, which transformative is a rather strong word, but it certainly strongly influenced their commitment, their passion, and also their knowledge and understanding. Now, what they do with reality checks, which was started in Bangladesh and were carried out for 5 successive years, this was supported by Swedish CEDA, is they have researchers, usually fairly young researchers, but also older ones from NGOs and so on. And they go and they stay in with the same family at the same time of year for 5 nights. And they go to 15 different sites, so there are a bit more than 30 of them, because 2 go to each site, which have been chosen to be representative of different conditions in Bangladesh. And they stay, and their particular remit was primary education and primary health, because these were sector programs that CEDA was funding. And then they're just ordinary people. During the day, they don't take any notes. They do take some photographs. Then they come back together and they share their experiences. And in this way, they are in touch and up to date with what is happening. Social and economic change may be more rapid in Bangladesh than in many countries. It's quite remarkable. The fertility rate is down to 2.2 or 2.3, which is more or less European. It's quite astonishing what has happened in Bangladesh. So it may be exceptional. Nevertheless, what they found was happening with primary education and with primary health was news to the people in Dhaka. The person running this had an hour and a half with the Director of Education, who really pressed her to give information about what was happening. And the sorts of things which they identified were, for instance, that the money which was going to help primary education for very poor people was being demanded by the children going to school so that they could buy snacks from aggressive snack sellers outside the primary schools. And this was going on all over Bangladesh, and when this was done in Indonesia, they found the same thing happening. But the officials didn't know about this. So that's just one example. The overconsumption of salt, suddenly. There was terrific consumption of salt. Salt in tea? Have you ever had salt in tea? No, I know, it sounds awful. But in Bangladesh, there was this craze. It was partly because the World Bank had been involved in iodizing salt. And so there was a big, use salt campaign, and the effect of this was actually dangerous for health because of the overconsumption of salt, and on and on. Now this approach has been used now in Indonesia, in Nepal, in Mozambique, in Ghana, and it's spreading, and it's very, very powerful. And coming to the PRA point, in Mozambique, an NGO was pushing poultry, and they did this. And when the NGO used participatory techniques like matrix scoring and so on, they got the feedback that people really liked poultry. When they used this approach of staying with the families and living with them, they discovered that poultry were not a priority at all. But even with the PRA methods, they were feeding back to the NGO what they knew the NGO wanted to hear. And it makes you really wonder how much all of us are victims of this. And when we do short rural visits, we're taken to the same place, sign the visitor's book. We've all had this experience. There are these deeply embedded biases in how we learn. But this is a way of overcoming it. And I'm hoping with the SDGs and universality that this is something that can be done everywhere. It should be done in this country. It should be done everywhere, so that there's a sense of reality, of the changing reality of poor people and of people who are marginalized. So that's an exciting one, and you can Google for it, and I think it's reality check approach. I think it's on the list there. The other one, which I have to show you, this is again from Bangladesh. It's called Measuring Empowerment, Ask Them, and then it says quantifying qualitative outcomes from people's own analysis. Wow. Quantifying qualitative outcomes from people's own analysis. You can download this, again, from the CEDA website. So if you Google for measuring empowerment, ask them, you'll get this, and you can download it. I'll tell you this story as well, because it's quite revealing about mindsets. Again, it's Swedish Cedar, and it's the same person, Dija, who was involved with the other one and her Bangladeshi colleagues. A social movement which was being supported by CEDA. 500,000 or more people involved in the social movement. It was to do with land and to do with rights and various things. They wanted an evaluation. They asked some external consultants about empowerment, and the external consultants came up with 5 or 6 potential measures of empowerment. You know, the usual sort of thing: do women go to meetings, and do they speak, and you know the sort of thing that consultants come up with. They used a participatory approach, listening to people, using popular theatre for people to express their values, interviewing people, listening to people. And they found 800 different potential indicators. And they condensed these 800 down to 132. And people then said, yeah, okay. And so they met in groups of about 15, sometimes all men together, or women together, sometimes mixed, every 6 months or a year. And they gave themselves a happy face or an unhappy face, according to each of the indicators. The consultants and people in donor agencies, when they heard about this, they said, and it's all recorded in here, they said, this is outrageous. Don't you realize poor people's time is valuable? How can we expect them to do 132 indicators? They said, either this is really exploitative, or these are not the people we thought they were, because they've got all this time. So they took this feedback back to the groups, and they said, what's your problem? Yes, surely it does take time. It takes 3 hours or more. But we do it, we enjoy it, we find it very useful, we learn from it, and it helps us to change. So it is actually an extraordinary way of generating numbers, because they're comparable between groups, and aggregating the numbers. And how the aggregation can be done is in here by Carlos Barahona, who's at Reading University, who's very, very good statistician. And they're measuring things like gender relations in the household. You know, does the woman just get the fish head? Or what? You know, they identified their own indicators, and in some cases the indicators changed because they would alter them, or they would make the indicators stronger. So this process was one of self-awareness about social change, of generating statistics about social change. Unfortunately, there was then a major corruption scandal, and I think the system does not continue today. But nevertheless, this document is there, and you can read it and think about it and reflect on whether it could be applied elsewhere. So this one doesn't produce numbers. This one does produce numbers. Do have a look at them when we get to the break.